A daughter-in-law is supposed to work without eating or drinking. That's common sense. During the New Year's gathering at my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law, who was sitting next to me, suddenly struck me. It seems she didn't like the fact that I had a sip of water. Why should I, a pregnant woman, have to endure such treatment? Moreover, my mother-in-law repeatedly punched my shoulder with her fist, and her strength was gradually increasing. The suddenness of the event and the intensity of her actions left my husband and others who were there frozen, with the blank expressions for a few seconds. My husband and the others quickly regained their senses and tried to intervene, but those few seconds of delay turned the situation critical. "Scarlett, it hurts. Please stop. When you are just a daughter-in-law, don't you dare talk back." My mother-in-law misunderstood my plea as talking back as she lost her cool and forcefully punched my belly. There is a baby in my belly. After being hit by my mother-in-law while I was sitting down, I put my hand on the table and held my belly with the other hand as I crouched. "Are you okay?" My husband was worried about our baby and me, and the relatives who were there also worried about me. "Oh, come on, it's just a little smack," my mother-in-law said dismissively as she sipped her tea. After she has just hit someone, how can she say that? While there was a tense atmosphere in the room, my brother-in-law, observing my mother-in-law casually sipping her tea, said, "I'm 26 years old, and my husband, Tristan, is 27 years old, and we both work. We don't have any children yet, but recently, I discovered that I'm 2 months pregnant. It's a joyful occasion, and I wanted to share the news with everyone right away, but my husband had a suggestion. Since New Year's is coming up, and everyone will be gathering at my parents' house, why don't we announce it then, and surprise everyone?" I thought it sounded like a fun idea, so I agreed to my husband's proposal. I love my job, and plan to continue working after giving birth, and my husband understands and supports that. With an understanding husband and a new addition to our family, my life was filled with happiness. However, there's one thing I'm worried about. Wait a minute, the house isn't properly cleaned yet, is it? And there isn't much food in the fridge. I'm sorry. I work too, and I just don't have much time. My in-laws' house is about a 40-minute drive away, and my mother-in-law, Scarlett, who is still capable of driving at 54, often visited our house on weekends. She lives with my father-in-law, Atticus, and my grandmother-in-law, Colette, but my mother-in-law always comes alone. It's okay for her to come to our house, but she always nags and complains. Is it so much fun for her to criticize me like this? My husband has a brother named Marcus, and they are close. Since my husband is the youngest child, he grew up being adored by my mother-in-law, and she seemed like a typical case of a parent who couldn't let their child go. I often talk to my brother-in-law's wife, Lexi, who is in the same position as a daughter-in-law on the phone, and ask for advice. However, even though I say ask for advice, the child whom my mother-in-law can't let go is my husband, so she doesn't get nagged as much by my mother-in-law. Therefore, she just listens to me vent basically. Moreover, my sister-in-law and her husband have 3 children, so they are knowledgeable about childbirth and child-rearing. I'll probably ask them for advice about parenting in the future. For now, I'm trying to remain calm and not get irritated, so as not to negatively affect the baby. However, my mother-in-law, who still doesn't know about my pregnancy, continues to visit on weekends and criticize me as usual. Normally, I would endure it to avoid causing any trouble in the daughter-in-law/mother-in-law relationship, but now that I have a baby in my belly, I decided to talk to my husband about it. Even though we decided not to say anything to her, no matter what she says to me, I want to reduce stress for the baby. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I'll talk to her and make sure she doesn't nag. My husband, while avoiding mentioning the pregnancy, told her not to nag me. However, this warning made the situation worse. My mother-in-law has continued to visit our house, even after my husband talked to her, but she no longer criticizes me openly. However, the only time she doesn't nag me is when my husband is around, so when we are alone, she still nags. How dare you tattle on me to Tristan? You are so cocky when you are just a daughter-in-law. Moreover, did my husband's warning intensify her dissatisfaction with me? Since she now says these things when my husband is not around, her maliciousness has increased. Furthermore, it seems that she wants to imply that I'll face even worse consequences if I tell him again, as she has started using violence. I heard you've been taking time off work and making Tristan do household chores lately. Don't you dare slack off in your position as a wife. Recently, she said this and punched my shoulder hard with her fist. She often uses stick-like objects, such as brooms or rulers, to hit my arms or hands, too. The reason why I've been taking time off work and having my husband help with household chores is because I've been not feeling well due to my pregnancy. While it's understandable that she misunderstands, since she doesn't know about my condition, using violence is still absolutely unacceptable. Does she think that using violence will make me more compliant? Unfortunately for her, I don't have the kind of personality that backs down easily in such situations. I decided to talk to my husband again. I'm sorry. I didn't expect the situation to get worse when I warned her. I'll talk to her again, but this time I'll ask my dad to talk to her as well. It seems my father-in-law later talked to her, and she stopped coming to the house. However, she still calls sometimes, so we haven't completely cut ties or become estranged. With time, once things cool down, she'll likely come back. Plus, New Year's is just around the corner, and it's the day we are going to announce my pregnancy. I hoped that her attitude would change once she found out she would have a grandchild. About a month after my mother-in-law stopped coming to the house, we visited my in-laws' house for New Year's gathering. We're here, Mom. Happy New Year. Welcome. Marcus and the kids are already here. Before going to my in-laws' house, I was anxious that my mother-in-law might criticize me or use violence against me, but it seems that there was no need to worry. She spoke to me brightly. Had she reflected and turned over a new leaf? From inside the house, I could hear the voices of my brother-in-law's children. My mother-in-law took us to the room where the children's voices were coming from. Tristan! It's been a while. Long time no see. In the room, there were my brother-in-law's family, my father-in-law, and my grandmother-in-law Colette, who would turn 81 this year. We've been waiting for you both. It had been a while since we had all gathered, as we only get together on July long week and New Year's. Our conversation was lively as we caught up. After a while, it was time to start preparing dinner. When we get together at my in-laws' house, it is customary to have a meal together, so we decided to announce the pregnancy during the mealtime. Well, should we start preparing dinner? As I was about to take a sip of water, my mother-in-law said that. My mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and I usually cook together, but that day, since I hadn't been feeling well since morning, my husband had kindly offered to help with cooking. Scarlett, I'm sorry. Tristan will be helping this time. I took a sip of the water from the cup I picked up and placed it back on the table. At that moment, my mother-in-law, who was sitting next to me, suddenly raised her voice and punched my shoulder with her fist. You! Don't get cocky just because I've been quiet. It's common sense for a daughter-in-law to work without eating or drinking. The timing of me lifting the cup and her saying that we should start preparing dinner couldn't have been worse, and this simple act of drinking water seemed to have made my mother-in-law think that I had an arrogant attitude. I never expected that water would become a landmine. She had been speaking to me with a cheerful demeanor, but it was only because she had been told to do so by my husband and father-in-law. She still disliked me, as before. Perhaps she had been harboring a lot of resentment, as she repeatedly punched my shoulder with her fist, and her strength was gradually increasing. My husband and father-in-law were aware of my mother-in-law's violence against me. I vent to my sister-in-law, so my brother-in-law and she also knew about my mother-in-law's violent behavior. But I guess they didn't expect my mother-in-law's violence to be this bad. Even for me, this level of violence was also a first. The suddenness of the event and the intensity of my mother-in-law's actions left my husband and father-in-law frozen, with the blank expressions for a few seconds. They quickly regained their composure and tried to intervene, but those few seconds of delay were critical. "Scarlett, it hurts. Please stop. Don't you dare talk back when you are just a daughter-in-law." Can someone become so violent in an instant? Or is it just my mother-in-law? My mother-in-law misunderstood my plea as talking back, as she had lost her cool and punched my belly with full force before my husband and father-in-law could stop her. After being hit by my mother-in-law, while I was sitting down, placed one hand on the table and held my belly with the other hand as I crouched. "Are you okay?" My husband was worried about both the baby and me, and the relatives who were there were concerned for me too. "For heaven's sake, it was just a little smack. You guys are overreacting," my mother-in-law said, adjusting her sitting position, and took a sip of tea while huffing. My husband and I were too concerned about the baby to respond to my mother-in-law. However, it was my brother-in-law who spoke up to my mother-in-law in our place after she had her tea. "Aren't you someone's daughter-in-law, too? It's common sense for a daughter-in-law to work without eating or drinking, right? I meant, a daughter-in-law in the weakest position among all of us here should take the initiative and work harder." "Then, that means, you were the daughter-in-law who was in the weakest position in this house before we got married, right? Were you doing all the housework back then, when we lived here?" My brother-in-law's words darkened my mother-in-law's face. According to my brother-in-law, when he and my husband still lived at home, my mother-in-law apparently had their grandparents do much of the housework. Moreover, she had pushed the household chores onto their grandparents secretly, so that the rest of the family would not find out. My brother-in-law had witnessed that when he was young, and he didn't fully understand it at the time. He had apparently talked to his grandmother about it. "Why don't you tell everyone? Are you being bullied by Mom, Grandma?" "Well, you see, I'm being punished because I used to bully your mom. It's my own business, so don't tell anyone." It seemed that my grandmother-in-law had bullied my mother-in-law in the past. I wasn't the only victim of a daughter-in-law bullying. As my grandmother-in-law aged, and the roles reversed between her and my mother-in-law had started to take out her frustration on my grandparents-in-law secretly. I thought my mother-in-law disliked me for marrying her son because she was unable to let go of him. But not only that, the fact that my grandmother-in-law is almost 81 years old makes it harder to treat her badly, and it seems that made my mother-in-law start pointing her frustration at me. I found it infuriating that the reason of this daughter-in-law bullying was just that I was being caught in the crossfire. I didn't do anything wrong. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I couldn't hold it in. It's okay. You kept the secret for a long time, and I was grateful for that." The atmosphere quickly shifted to make my mother-in-law the villain, and the conversation momentarily stopped. At that moment, my sister-in-law, who had missed the opportunity, as so much was unfolding at such a furious pace, took the kids to another room. "What's this? Are you saying that I'm the bad guy? You've just heard the story. That old hag over there is at fault too. And this dumb daughter-in-law here, who slacks off on housework and her job, is also at fault. Do you all want to hit me, like I hit that dumb daughter-in-law? We would never hurt you physically. Calm down and be rational. Besides, Grandma has silently obeyed your orders all this time. Forgive her already. And you just hit. My husband tried to bring up the topic of the baby, so I stopped him. I wanted to tell her about the baby myself. Wait, it's an important matter, so I'll say it. Scarlett, there's a baby inside my belly. What? What do you mean? Why were you hiding something so important? We were planning to surprise everyone with the announcement when we have meal today. What a terrible pregnancy announcement. However, when my brother-in-law, father-in-law, and grandmother-in-law found out that I was pregnant, that made my mother-in-law look even more evil. Is your belly okay? I'll take you to the hospital right now. I'm okay. I'll go to the hospital later. It was New Year's and it was cold, so I was wearing a belly wrap to keep my belly warm. Inside the wrap, I even had a heat pad, so my belly was protected. Furthermore, my 54-year-old mother-in-law didn't have much strength, so while I was very shocked by the punch in my belly, the pain wasn't that severe. You know that if you were to punch a pregnant woman and cause a miscarriage, it's considered a crime, since you had given birth and raised your children, right? I'm sorry, but I didn't know that you were pregnant. You can't blame me for that, can you? Just because you didn't know about the pregnancy, does that mean it's okay to punch someone? This isn't something that can be resolved with an apology. If it can't be resolved with an apology, then what do you want me to do? She was seen by everyone as she built up her frustration with me, exploded in anger, and violently attacked me in a fit of rage, and now she seems to be in a panic as she found out that I am pregnant. Her emotions were swinging wildly up and down in a short period of time, like a roller coaster ride. Could she no longer make a rational judgment? She seemed unrepentant and expressed her angry feeling again, in an aggressive manner. What are you going to do? Report me to the police? Go ahead! You're not even injured, are you? Moreover, you guys witnessed and can testify that I hurt her today, but I don't remember anything about the past incidents. That foolish daughter-in-law is just exaggerating things. I don't think today's single act of violence is a significant crime, to be honest. In fact, it might just be seen as a family squabble, and the police might not even take it seriously, haha. A person who is unrepentant is not scared of anything. She became more talkative and began provoking us. However, what my mother-in-law was saying was a fair argument, and as it stands, there's a high likelihood that the police won't take any action. To get the police involved, we absolutely need evidence. Scarlett, does that mean you're willing to go to the police with us? You've been gathering evidence, right? Yes. My sister-in-law, who had took the children to another room, returned. As my sister-in-law said, I had evidence. My husband and I had a good relationship with my sister-in-law and her husband, and I often complained about my mother-in-law to my sister-in-law, so she knew about both her nagging and her violent behavior. Hey, you might think it's not a big deal, but what she is doing to you is emotional abuse. Lexi, you're overreacting. I'm not. We can't guarantee that it won't escalate from here, and just in case, wouldn't it be better to start gathering evidence now? Wouldn't it look like I'm doing something wrong, sneaking around like this? If nothing happens, then it won't come out, and isn't it worth it for peace of mind, just in case? Following my sister-in-law's advice, I began gathering evidence, just as a precaution. It's sad that these pieces of evidence actually came in handy. Did my sister-in-law foresee how this situation would unfold. The first thing I gathered as evidence was the audio recordings, the classic. I had put my phone in my pocket and recorded our conversations using an app whenever I was alone with my mother-in-law, so I can record her nagging. Since it was audio recording, I don't have a video footage of her violence. However, I recorded the sound of her hitting me, and I guided the conversation to make it clear what she was doing. "Scarlett, it hurts, so please stop hitting me with the broom. This can't possibly hurt that much. You're really exaggerating." "I'm not exaggerating. My hand is turning red. It's not that bad. You are fine. You're my daughter-in-law, so it's your fault for not listening to me." Since it was only audio recordings of a conversation, the admissibility of evidence regarding the violence would likely be weaker compared to a video footage. However, to supplement my evidence, I also kept a diary. In the diary, I wrote as much details as possible about my mother-in-law's emotional and physical abuse against me, such as when, where, and what was said to me, and what kind of violence I experienced. Additionally, when I was hit, and there were visible marks or bruises, I would take photos with my phone and print them out. Furthermore, as I was genuinely troubled by my relationship with my mother-in-law, I consulted with the local government and a family relationship counseling support center. It seemed that records of consultations with the police or support centers could also serve as evidence. I had no idea that even my diary and records of consultations could be considered evidence. Since Scarlett said that she was fine with it, let's go to the police with this evidence. Also, since it's emotional and physical abuse, we should consult with a lawyer too, shouldn't we? Scarlett, be prepared for possible compensation as well. Wait. A police and a lawyer? You're not serious, right? My mother-in-law, upon learning that I had been gathering various pieces of evidence, began to panic once again. It's hard to keep up with all kinds of emotions she's been showing to us. Although we have evidence, being legal novices, we don't know how strong their evidentiary value is. Therefore, even with this evidence, there's a possibility that the police might not take action. However, the presence of numerous pieces of evidence significantly increases the chances of the police getting involved. It seems that my mother-in-law, who couldn't make a calm judgment due to her intense emotions, found this to be a sufficient threat. Maybe it's time for you to go to the hospital? I'm worried about the baby. I thought only about 10 minutes had passed, but it had already been close to 40 minutes. With just a few words, my father-in-law managed to calm down everyone who was heated up. I'm sure that he was concerned about my baby, but he likely decided that things would become uncontrollable if we continued like this. He had previously advised my mother-in-law not to nag me and also not to use violence. He even warned her not to go to our house, despite me not saying anything. Moreover, even though she eventually exploded, he patiently dealt with my emotional mother-in-law with a smile on his face. He may not say much, but he's dependable, making the right decisions and speaking up when needed. That's right. Well, I'll think about how to deal with Mom after we go to the hospital. And so, this gathering came to an end. We found a hospital that was open even on New Year's and had the baby checked. Just to be safe, we were planning to go to the hospital, which we usually go to after New Year's, and have the baby checked again. The next day, my husband and father-in-law told me that since I was the one who got hit, they were leaving all the decisions to me. I'm not injured, and the baby in my belly is fine, so I think I'll be okay, without involving the police or a lawyer. I don't want to deal with such trouble while the baby is growing up. Also, even if I don't do anything about it, I heard from my husband that my father-in-law had made a decision to do something about it. That's enough for me. 3 months later, my mother-in-law and father-in-law got divorced. It seems that when he found out about her mistreatment of his mother and her violence towards me, and he found it difficult to continue living with my mother-in-law. In particular, the mistreatment of his mother was the final straw that led to the decision to divorce. My father-in-law deeply regretted not realizing his wife's actions sooner. My mother-in-law pushed household chores onto my grandmother-in-law when my father-in-law was away at work, and not only my mother-in-law, but also my grandmother-in-law had kept this fact hidden. Therefore, I think it was difficult for him to notice, and I hope my father-in-law doesn't blame himself too much. I believe my grandmother-in-law probably feels the same way. Although she has some money from property division, my mother-in-law is only 54 years old, and she can't live on that money alone. She's not yet eligible for a pension, so she'll have to start looking for work, but finding a job at 54 will likely be quite challenging. Since the reason for the divorce is that neither my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, nor my husband will likely help her. My mother-in-law's life ahead is sure to be a hell. After the divorce, my mother-in-law tried to return to her parents' home. Her parents were still alive, but my father-in-law had already told them the reason for their divorce. Since her parents knew the reason for the divorce, they apparently sent her away and told her not to come back. Therefore, she sought a place where she could live as comfortably as possible, and as a result, she ended up returning to the town where she had lived with my father-in-law. Currently, she is renting a cheap apartment and is working part-time at a supermarket. However, it seems that she isn't doing well at work and is treated as a nuisance by the younger generation of co-workers. Additionally, she can't get many shifts due to her inability to perform well, resulting in a low monthly income. She's depleting her savings to make ends meet. Although her money will eventually run out, at this rate, my husband, brother-in-law, and father-in-law have no intention of helping her. It's her own doing, so she'll have to figure things out on her own. My brother-in-law is busy with raising his 3 children as usual. My father-in-law now lives with my grandmother-in-law. While he's at work, a home helper is taking care of my grandmother-in-law, but he is about to retire soon. After retiring, he intends to take care of his mother himself. I have entered the late trimester of my pregnancy. I'm very busy with preparations for the new addition to our family. However, I feel happy with the busyness of it.